I hope I'm not going to piss off too many people with this one. It's been almost a year and a half since I bought my first custom keyboard, which has yet to arrive. But in the meantime, I have bought or been given the opportunity to try out many more boards, and along with them, switches, keycaps, and a bunch of accessories which are great but sometimes also pointless. In this video, I thought of documenting my findings, which might help out one or two souls who could be struggling with picking a path or part. Now, a little disclosure here, nothing I say is law, it's merely what I would tell myself if I could jump back in time and help my past version in making a decision, one that would hopefully end up saving me some money. So in this video, I'm gonna try to break it down between keyboards, keycaps, and switches, as well as some smaller accessories too, but I won't be making any specific recommendation. It's more about things to keep an eye out for, so stick around if this piqued your interest. Yeah, as the title suggests, your first keyboard is probably not going to be your endgame. That can have a myriad of reasons, but for me it was the fact that I simply didn't know better, even though I thought I did. I watched a ton of videos on boards trying to learn all the lingo and get references right, but without trying them, I knew close to nothing. For example, if somebody said this board feels like XY, but a bit firmer, clackier, that might sound good or bad, but the problem is I didn't know what the board XY felt like. I didn't have it. I had no board. The same goes for switches and everything else. Without any reference point, none of the comparisons made any sense to me. Add to that sound tests, which really only tell a partial story. Near Lucid, a really great channel by the way, has a fantastic video on why sound tests aren't as factual as some might think. I don't want to spoil too much, as you should go ahead and watch it, but part of it is about how everyone's setup is different, from room acoustics to the microphones used and so on, causing variations that can end up showing you something that might be impossible to recreate in your own environment. Adding insult to injury, I didn't even know what sound I actually liked. I just generally enjoyed everything I heard and simply thought, I want one of those, but God did I not know what the heck I was listening to. I'd like to compare this to the time when I first started playing guitar. I didn't know the difference between single coil soap bars and humbuckers. Heck, I couldn't even tell the difference between the neck and the bridge pickup. That's how bad my hearing was or how untrained it was. Everything just sounded like guitar. Probably not the best analogy for people who aren't six-string wielders, but what I'm trying to say is that your tastes will require time to develop, so whatever you're hunting for at the beginning might not be what you end up liking. So don't stress it, just try it. I know it's a very expensive hobby, which is why I urge everyone that asks me about custom boards to start with the cheapest one that they can get, just to get the ball rolling. Think of it as your training wheels into the custom world. Nowadays there are also a lot more wallet-friendly entries, some are easier to get than others, but you can get pretty close to high-end without having to spend an exuberant amount of money. I know it's a bit unsettling thinking of having to buy something just in order to figure out what to buy next, but spending a large sum on your first board just to find out that this whole thing wasn't really for you could be worse. If you've been lurking around on the interwebs for long enough, you'll eventually come across the fabled GMK. If you haven't, here's a quick rundown. GMK is most often regarded as the top gun of custom keycap manufacturing. I don't know if they've been around the longest, but it sure feels like they've been there at the inception. They've also got a number of facts backing that up. For example, they use thick ABS construction, which accounts for their great sound, they have razor-sharp double-shot lettering, and depending on who you ask, they have the holy grail of profiles, that is the original cherry. Now, if none of those things rang any bell with you, well, then those things may not really matter all that much. Yet. The only value those buzzy words will give you right now is ammunition for those pesky schoolyard arguments. I think before jumping into the luxurious territory that's GMK, it's worth checking out what else is out there, and oh boy has it ever changed since last year. When I built my first custom keyboard, I tried to do so with only in-stock parts. Back then it was very hard to come by something that you could buy and also looked as good as some of those beautiful GMK sets, but these days there are quite a lot of choices. Beginning with Drop, for the longest time they've built a reputation for being the place to get MT3 style caps, that's those really tall ones, offering various sets including collaborations with big brands like Lord of the Rings or even Marvel. Heck, they even have a Noctua set. But this year they entered a new profile into the playing field, the MT2, DCX. First offering a white on black and what I got here black on white set, but since then have also steadily rolled out more and more color options. If you ask me, they look really nice, and if more color themes are added at the current pace, you're going to have a lot of choices in the near future. Similarly, KBD fans have started to create their own sets under the PBD fans brand, with the main difference being that PBD fans use, well, PBT and DCX is using ABS like GMK. However, as Drop will have you know, it is a different composition of ABS that should withstand the dreaded shine that standard GMK sets will develop. Now, if those material choices don't mean anything to you, again, I wouldn't stress about it too much at this time. It's like trying to deconstruct the ingredients of a 5-course Michelin star menu whilst you've spent most of your life eating takeout cheeseburgers, meaning you're probably not gonna notice a difference. Better save it for when your palate is actually able to appreciate it. More interesting, if you ask me, is the fact that Drop and PBD fans are both aiming directly at GMK but at a much lower price, and they're not the only ones trying to do that. Monakai, which is best known for their high-end custom boards, at least up until recently, have just showcased their first pre-build, which is aimed at the more casual consumer. Along with that board, they also released their first white on black set called the Series 1. It's another great entry into the cap space, and one that I personally really liked, which is why I got it, but it's not perfect. The ISO enter key, for example, looks a bit too squiggly if you ask me.
Oh, squiggly line in my eye fluid. I see you there, lurking on the periphery of my vision. But when I try to look at you, you scurry away.
Continuing the list of custom board brands entering the custom cap space, we have Mode, which also just announced their first set. Now, this hasn't come out yet, but from the looks of it, it's another promising first entry with some great color options. There are two things all of these companies have in common. First, all of them are undercutting GMK in pricing, sometimes starting as low as $79 compared to around $150 for GMK. Most of them will also come with more extras in their base kit, whereas GMK will set you back around $200 or even more when you want all the fun bits. The second similarity is that they all got themselves well-known keycap designers to create their first entries, and you can tell that there are some really nice looking sets out there compared to just a year ago. Before we close the book on caps, there are a few more entries I would like to mention. One of them is Osume Keys, a company focused exclusively on caps if you don't count their one board collaboration. Now, these are probably the cutest caps you're gonna find out there. I mean, just look at these novelties here. There's a ghost sleeping in a cloud, one opening a window, although I'd like to think that it's actually a fridge. And I mean, just look at this box. Perfection. There are other smaller brands going to the same direction, sometimes making an in-stock debut for a limited time. Such was the case with the Q PPT terminal set. Both of these are die sublimated too, meaning the legends are printed on instead of being separated by two pieces molded together. The benefit of this is that the design can be a bit more daring. The drawback is inconsistent leveling, lettering, and the fear of them wearing out quicker than their double shot or triple shot counterparts. There's one more company that has also entered the keycap space, but this one is going in a different direction than the rest. Whereas Drop, KBD, Monakai, Osume and all the others are trying to mimic the Cherry profile, undercutting GMK in pricing and hopefully catching trigger-happy customers by having sets readily stocked, we've also got Ranaworks. They're doing what they're best at, entering the market at a higher price than anyone else with a profile that nobody has had any experience with, as well as a waiting time that's, well, unconfirmed at best. But who knows, maybe those will become the new top guns. I for one have 2 sets on order, which I'll be making a video about during my 10-year YouTube anniversary celebration, so see you then. When it comes to switches, I still feel very inexperienced, even though all of them can be broken down into one of 3 basic types. The number of variations, materials and configurations is so vast that sometimes I can't help but think I have no idea what this feels like. There are also so many of them out there.
There's too many of them.
So the best advice I would give to my 2021 self is, well, you probably already guessed it. Try them. This is again a moment where a board would come in very handy. There are switch testers out there, but I feel like those don't really convey a true typing experience because you're not really typing on them, you are just hitting individual switches and with only one finger. The same goes if you're just buying individual ones to try out, which I did too at first. That method will give you an initial impression, but it is really hard to judge whether or not you're gonna like it spread across an entire board. What I think might be a good way to approach this is to try to find something that has a reasonably good reputation, like Gator Black Inks, NK Creams, Bobas, or even Drop's Holy Panda. Getting a really popular switch will have a number of advantages. First, it should at worst be at least a decent switch. I mean, it has to be popular for a reason. Secondly, even if you don't like them, if they are popular, chances are people will use them as a comparison to other switches, giving you a good point of reference for future buys. I'd also advise to stick into the switches for at least a couple of days, even if you don't like them at first. They sometimes take a while to break in and you'll notice either them or your preference is changing, so don't dismiss them too fast. Maybe it just takes a couple of days to get used to. Lastly, there's the topic of lubing. This will change the feel and sound of a switch drastically, and although there are quite a few factory lubed switches out there, I found that those don't tend to be as well or consistently treated as when doing it by yourself. However, as much as I would encourage everyone to at least once lube an entire set, I can understand that a time slot of 4 to 6 hours is a difficult luxury to acquire. Another way to get there is through money. There are sites like Lube Switches which specialize in, well, as the name suggests, lubed switches. And they also sell broken-in switches, meaning ones that feel like as if they've been at work for a while. KBD fans alike has a selection too. I actually bought this set once and was pleasantly surprised by it. It wasn't perfect though, not everything was as well lubed, but I wouldn't have managed to do it better by myself either. Given the results, I think it's a valid choice, even if it isn't as satisfying. A fair warning though, if you do choose to go the hard path of lubing everything by yourself, avoid it on your first board if the PCB requires soldering. Even though every tutorial on lubing will remind you countless times that you should be very conservative with the amount you're applying, everyone will most likely overdo it on their first set. But even if you do, not all is lost. Switches can be desoldered, removed, cleaned and reapplied, but it'll be a very long and treacherous process, so keep this in mind. Once again, training wheels. I know everyone wants to get to the finish line as fast as possible, and I myself probably wouldn't have listened to this advice, but in retrospect, my first attempt ended up ruining a build. I've got a lot less to say about stabilizers, mostly because I've settled on using the old steps for pretty much every build these days. Now, I've also tried the Fable to Work V2s as well as these Everglide V2s, but the reason why I settled on the old steps is for the number of extras you get, as well as the straightness out of the box. For example, they all come with tapes for the Band-Aid mod washers and these little PE foam wire cushions. Now, you can achieve all of this with other steps too, but as I am insanely lazy, I for one welcome the extras. The old steps are advertised as liquid metal, which is supposed to retain its straightness, even going so far as to bend back automatically, in case there was force put on the wires during shipping or a similar event. From the limited amount of steps that I've had the chance of trying, the old steps have been the straightest one out of the box. The Durox and Everglides were about the same, not bad either, but there were definitely one or two that needed adjustment. One last thing regarding lubing, even if you just do it once, I can't help but stress that a switch opener like this cat thing here will most likely save you from going crazy. The $10 to $15 you're gonna spend on one of these will be well worth it. I really didn't think I needed one at first, but after getting it, it's just so much easier and less of a strain when you've got like 60 to 80 switches to go through. The KBD Fans lube kit is also pretty good at only $5, especially the stem holder, which makes it a lot easier to lube without having to touch it and potentially getting grease all over your fingers. Lube stations, trays and other items seem to be more cosmetic to me. You can achieve all that with regular kitchen items as well, but of course you might have a lot more fun with dedicated equipment. Another item you'll come across is a switch or keycap puller. Now, the worst switch pullers ever are these little metal things here. They're incredibly uncomfortable, and if you're planning on changing switches more than once, I'd recommend getting something else. I forgot where I got this silicone wrapped one here, but this one has been my favorite. Likewise, when it comes to keycap pullers, there are these small plastic ones. They're essentially the keycap equivalent of those terrible metal things. The opening is very tight, which will, be warned, scratch your beloved keycaps, so I would really try to avoid using these at all costs. The most efficient ones are these antenna-looking things here. Even better is a combo like this one. They usually show up with a pre-build. Then there's this much more expensive and elaborate looking Gateron puller. It is definitely the fastest way to remove switches, but it does so at a price. If you got a delicate plate surface, the Gateron can potentially, or will definitely, scratch up that surface, so be careful when you get this and don't use it on an expensive board with a brass or metal plate. In general, and I hope this came across throughout the video, I think one of the most important things to keep in mind is that you shouldn't overthink it when you first start out. Like with many new things you get accustomed to, you'll learn along the way, and with that increased experience, your taste will develop and change. So whatever you think you like right now might not be the same in 6 or 12 months. It doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy your first experiments, but do so maybe a little restrained. Going out guns blazing at first might hinder your excitement in future builds. For example, I thought GMK was the be-all and end-all, but when I finally got my first set, I was a little disappointed, to be honest. At first, I didn't even want to look at PBT, which was really stupid, because by now I much prefer it. It doesn't shine, it's cheaper, and the choices keep getting better and better. I also enjoy the more elaborate designs that aren't available on a double-shot construction, but this, like everything else, is a matter of preferences. We've all got our favorites and we all like to stick to our guts. But really, I hope this video was helpful, and I hope you don't feel too stressed about trying to build the most perfect board on your first try. There are enough things out there to be worried about these days, and this shouldn't be one of them. This should be fun. So I hope that's what this was. Fun. Hey, thanks so much for watching. I hope there was at least something positive that you could take away from this video. I was actually planning on doing something completely different, but I've got several projects which are stuck in the shipping limbo, so I hope that I can return to the regular programming in the next few videos. Anyway, if I missed something or said something wrong, let me know, and until next time, I bid you farewell and see you around. Bye!